Hi and welcome. This is a quick introduction on how to use AtlasMaker. It's still work in progress, but at this point it is production ready for those of you who want to use it for creating assets for their dungeon crawler projects. If you have any questions or have some feedback, you can reach me on my Discord server or DM me directly on Twitter. Details on how to reach me are found in the description below. Let's start with creating a new project, and then go over to the Atlases tab and add a new atlas. Give the atlas a fitting name. It doesn't actually matter what you call the atlases, but I recommend you use names which make sense to you later when you will load these into your game. Now that we have created an atlas, we need to create an atlas layer. Once again, choose a name that makes sense for what you are going to render. In this case, I want to render a wall layer. Assign a 3D model for this layer. Currently, only .glb models are supported. It's a very common format, and most, if not all, major 3D modeling software have exporters for it. You can preview the assigned model just to ensure that everything is as it should be. What we need to do now is head over to the Atlases section and add this newly created atlas layer to it. An atlas can contain multiple atlas layers, providing a great way to group dungeon assets that logically belong together. For example, you can generate an atlas that contains all the different wall types, floor types, and ceiling types for a particular dungeon style. Commonly used assets such as chests, barrels, signposts, etc. can be grouped together in their own atlas, so they only need to be loaded once in the game. We need to set an output path so the program knows where to save the generated atlases. Once everything is set up, we can click the Make button to begin generating our atlases. When generation is complete, you'll see the newly made atlas in the preview window. Now let's create another atlas layer, this time for the ground. Select a 3D model. If you want, you can verify that it looks as it should. For this layer, we'll choose ground as the layer type. For the sake of completeness, let's also create a ceiling layer. This layer should be set as a ceiling layer type. Add the two newly created atlas layers to the atlas. Click the Make button to generate your atlas. As you can see, this atlas now contains the ceiling layer, ground layer, and wall layer. Now let's add another atlas, but this time for objects. We'll add an atlas layer for this object and give it a name. Let's choose a coffin this time. As before, select and assign a 3D model for the layer. Since we're rendering an object, we naturally choose the object layer type. Oh, and I almost forgot to take a look at the model. By the way, the models used in this demonstration were downloaded from Sketchfab and made by a guy called Vladik. I'll put a link in the description. Head over to Atlases again and add the newly created coffin layer to the object's atlas we created earlier. Hit the Make button again to generate both atlases. When generating multiple atlases with lots of layers, the generation process may take a while. If more than one atlas has been generated, you can navigate through them using the arrow buttons located at the top right. You can save rendering time by only rendering atlases that has had any changes made to them. Remove the tick on the Enabled checkbox to exclude atlases from being generated. I forgot to mention that you can change the scale of the models assigned to a layer. This is particularly useful when you are using wrongly sized models from a third-party asset pack. You can change the appearance of generated atlases by assigning an index palette. This will add a post-processing step that reduces the amount of colors and matches them to the chosen palette. You can also choose a dithering method and how much you want it to affect the atlas. Be aware that the post-processing step greatly increases the time it takes to generate the atlases. The viewport size essentially defines the resolution at which the dungeon viewport is rendered in your game. Here are examples of dungeon viewports from classic dungeon crawler games. Render size, also known as the perspective grid, determines the area where grid cells will be rendered. The depth property controls the drawing distance along the z-axis, indicating the number of grid cells away from the camera. Width determines the width of the perspective grid. For example, a value of 6 means that 6 columns of grid cells will be rendered on the left and right sides, with an additional middle column totaling 13 columns. The atlas padding property adds a slight separation between images within an atlas. In the camera setup screen, you can configure camera, light, and environmental settings. There are a lot of different parameters to tweak here, and my best recommendation is just to have at it and find something that works for you. You can also move around the preview dungeon by moving your mouse toward the edges of the viewport and clicking. Let's just render this out and see how it ended up looking. As you can see, all the adjustments to camera, light, and environment has affected the atlases. Here you can see the atlases we generated in action. This demo and its source code is available to download from the AtlasMaker page on itch.io. The link is in the description. Well, that's it for now. Thank you for following along. I hope this short demonstration will help you get started with using the AtlasMaker. I look forward to seeing all the cool stuff everyone make with this.